My family tricked me into co-signing for a $75,000 business loan, then shamed me in front of his friends as the fool who believed in him. A month later, he showed up begging for help while I sipped wine at my promotion party. I'm 39 now, living in Chicago, doing fairly well in corporate banking. But 3 years ago, I found myself in one of the most humiliating and financially draining situations of my life, and it was orchestrated by the one person I never thought would screw me over like that, my own brother. Growing up in Michigan, I was always the cautious one. I double-checked everything, from homework to whether the stove was off. Blaine, my older brother by 4 years, was the kind of person who believed the universe would somehow catch him if he fell. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Blaine was charismatic. He was good with people, good at talking his way out of things, and even better at making you feel like not helping him would mean you were the bad guy. Our mom, Lorraine, always made excuses for him. He's just creative, she'd say. He thinks differently. Yeah, differently enough to avoid responsibility like it was a contagious disease. The big idea came one summer when I visited Grand Rapids for a long weekend. Blaine had invited me to Mom's house under the pretense of catching up. What he actually wanted was a pitch meeting. He sat me down on the porch with this enormous sketchpad and started talking about opening a hybrid coffee shop and co-working space in Easttown, saying it would be like WeWork meets Blue Bottle Coffee. He threw out all the right buzzwords: scaling, community-based, artisan vendors, startup culture, and even talked about how remote work was the future and he'd found a heck location. I asked the usual questions. Have you done market research? Who's your demographic? What's your 5-year projection? He had a quick answer for everything, none of which made actual financial sense, but they sounded good. Then he dropped the explosive: he needed a co-signer. I just need someone credible to vouch for me, he said, with that lazy grin of his. You've got the credit. I've got a dream. I immediately said no. I'd seen his past projects. There was the hot dog food truck that burned down under suspicious circumstances, the yoga studio he managed for 2 months before disappearing, and the web development startup that never had a website. But he didn't let it go. Over the next 2 days, I got calls from Mom, texts from Blaine, and even a guilt-tripping email from our Uncle Lou, all saying how this could finally be the thing that works. It wore me down. It always does when it's family. So I gave in. I co-signed. The loan was approved 2 weeks later. $75,000. Enough to lease the space, start renovations, and cover basic operational costs for 3 months. For the first few weeks, Blaine sent me updates, photos of freshly painted walls, social media mock-ups, receipts from local contractors. I started to relax. Maybe, just maybe, he had matured. Then, nothing. No updates. No returned calls. Emails started bouncing back. I called Mom, who said, he's been busy at the shop, give him time. That was when the first missed payment notice came in. My name was right there on it. I drove out to Easttown unannounced and found the storefront locked, windows half covered in brown paper. No sign of renovations. No sign of life. I called him, finally got through, and asked what the hell was going on. He was at home, apparently, and just said, some things fell through. We're pivoting. Pivoting? With no plan and no money? I told him he needed to talk to the bank, come up with something, anything, to get it back on track. He said he would. He didn't. Then came the party. He invited me to what he called a soft launch celebration at his place. I didn't want to go, but again, family. I brought a bottle of wine and steeled myself for awkward small talk. His backyard was full of people, friends, local musicians, a few influencers. There was music, a rented photo booth, and trays of catered food. I kept wondering, how is he affording this? Halfway through the evening, Blaine got up on a makeshift stage and started making a speech. Big shout out to my little brother, he said, pointing at me. The guy who believed in me. And signed his life away so I could chase a dream. Let's hear it for the fool who still thinks I'll pay him back. People laughed. Laughed. I didn't. I left. That was the last time I spoke to him for over a month. I got serious after that. Started talking to the bank directly, gathering documentation, trying to see if there was a way to distance myself legally. There wasn't. I was just as liable as he was, and guess what? He wasn't making payments. I was already being hit with early credit dings. Then came the promotion. It was a huge step up at my firm, regional manager overseeing accounts across 3 states. The night I got the official offer, a few coworkers and I celebrated at a wine bar in River North. It was one of those sleek rooftop places where the glasses cost more than some people's groceries for the week. I was finally feeling like things were coming together. He looked completely out of place. The bar was full of sharply dressed professionals clinking glasses and toasting deals, and Blaine walked in wearing a frayed hoodie and jeans that had clearly seen better days. His hair was messy, eyes sunken, like he hadn't slept in a week. He scanned the room, spotted me, and walked straight over like nothing was out of the ordinary. "Hey, can we talk?" he said, like this was just a casual drop-in. I looked at him, then back at my coworkers. I excused myself, stepped away from the group, and followed him toward the rooftop's edge where it was quieter. The city stretched out behind him, all glowing lights and quiet noise. It was almost surreal. He didn't even ease into it. "I need help, man." Things fell apart. Of course they did. The landlord kicked me out of the space. Contractors are threatening legal action. And the bank, man, they're saying they're going to take me to court. I'm underwater. He talked fast, like if he got it all out quickly enough, it wouldn't sound so bad. Like rapid-fire problems would somehow translate into sympathy. I stood there, barely nodding, letting him unravel. It didn't take long. "I need money to settle with the landlord," he finally said. "Like a few grand. Just to stop things from getting worse." That was it. The moment. The ultimate irony. He had dragged me into a $75,000 mess, publicly humiliated me, vanished, then waltzed into my celebration asking for help. I stared at him for a long moment. Not angry, not sad, just tired. So damn tired. "I'm not helping you." His face dropped like he didn't actually believe I'd say it. "What? Come on, we're family." "No, Blaine. We were family before you used me." He opened his mouth again, but I shook my head. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want another pitch. I just turned and walked back to my table. I could feel his eyes on me, could feel the confusion and maybe even the anger brewing in him. But I didn't look back. I rejoined my team, picked up my glass, and kept smiling. Over the next few days, he tried texting. At first, it was pleading. Then it was guilt trips. Then came the classic deflection, "You're really gonna hold a grudge over one mistake?" But it wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern. One I had enabled for far too long. The thing is, Blaine's always been this way. Charming when he needs something, conveniently distant when it's time to own up. Our mother covered for him growing up, and I followed that example until I was old enough to realize what it was doing to me. This wasn't just about the loan. It was about every moment he treated my support like an obligation and my success like a joke. He showed up to a few family dinners after that, but I didn't. I pulled back. Mom called and left voicemails laced with disappointment. "He's struggling," she said. "He's your brother." But what she never said, what she couldn't say, was that Blaine had been given more chances than he deserved. That he always took and rarely gave. I started seeing a therapist that winter. The loan was still hanging over me like a dark cloud, but at least I had a plan to deal with it financially. Emotionally, though, it took longer to untangle. There's a unique kind of pain that comes from realizing someone you love doesn't see you as a person, just a resource. A safety net. I'd catch myself replaying the scene at the party over and over again, his smirk, the laughter, the moment he called me a fool in front of his friends. Not even enemies, his friends. And he hadn't even flinched. What hurt wasn't the embarrassment. It was the clarity. That I'd never really been his brother, not in the way I'd thought. I was just the guy who kept showing up when he didn't deserve it. I took on extra consulting work to manage the loan payments, working late into the night while Blaine posted vague entrepreneur life memes on Instagram. He still had an audience, people who thought he was on the verge of some genius comeback. Meanwhile, I was grinding to undo the damage of believing in him. He tried again a few months later, emailed me this time. A long, rambling message about how he realized he'd messed up, how nobody believes in me anymore, and how I don't have anyone else to turn to. He ended it with, "You're the only one who's ever really been there for me. Please don't stop now." I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care. But because I had finally learned that caring for someone doesn't mean letting them burn you down every time they feel cold. Blaine was right about one thing, I was the only one who'd always been there for him. But not anymore. The silence after that email was strangely freeing. For the first time in a long while, there was no expectation hanging over me. No crisis I needed to solve for someone else. No passive-aggressive texts from mom pressuring me to be the bigger person. Just space, quiet, unfamiliar, and overdue. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into every project, every number, every client meeting. My promotion meant more responsibility, but it also meant more autonomy. I got to hire my own team, build out new strategies, and travel more often. There were days I'd be walking through an airport somewhere in Ohio or sitting in a quiet corner of a downtown office and catch myself feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, stability. Still, the loan hung over me. Every payment I made felt like throwing money into a pit I didn't dig, but I kept going. I tracked every dollar, kept spreadsheets, and automated payments. I knew it would take years, but I wasn't letting it drag me down. If anything, it made me more disciplined. Mom kept trying to close the gap between me and Blaine. She'd say things like, "He's learning from his mistakes," or "You have to understand, he's not like you," as if being reckless was some kind of personality quirk that justified financial betrayal. I stopped trying to explain my side to her. The conversations always circled back to guilt. To my family. To obligation. One afternoon, I visited her in Grand Rapids. I hadn't been home in months, and she said she missed me. I figured I owed her at least that much. When I arrived, Blaine's car was in the driveway. I considered leaving. Just backing out and pretending I'd never seen it. But something in me, maybe stubbornness, maybe closure, kept me there. I parked, walked inside, and was greeted by Mom in the kitchen. Blaine was at the dining table, eating a sandwich like he didn't have $75,000 worth of debt under my name. He looked rougher than the last time I saw him. His beard was patchy, his clothes hung off him like he'd lost weight fast. He nodded when he saw me. "Hey." I nodded back. "Didn't know you'd be here." Mom tried to smooth things over. "He's just here helping with the gutters." "I told him you were coming, but I didn't think you'd mind." I said calmly. "But I'm here now." There was a long pause, thick with the kind of tension that doesn't need to be spoken. Blaine looked like he wanted to say something. I didn't care what it was. We sat through lunch mostly in silence, save for Mom's nervous chatter about neighborhood gossip and church events. Blaine kept sneaking glances at me, like he was waiting for a moment that never came. Afterward, while Mom was in the kitchen doing dishes, he followed me out to the porch. "You really hate me now, huh?" I didn't answer right away. I leaned on the railing, looking out over the neighborhood we grew up in, same mailboxes, same cracked sidewalks. It was oddly peaceful. "I don't hate you," I said. "I just don't trust you. And I'm done paying the price for that." He looked like he wanted to argue but didn't. For once. "I screwed up," he said quietly. "I thought I could fix it before it got bad. And then it just Got worse. Yeah, I replied. That's how it usually works. He stared at the ground. I'm trying, you know. I've been working nights. Picking up stuff under the table. Trying to figure it out. I hope you do, I said, not unkindly. But it's not my problem anymore. That was it. I left that day feeling clearer than I'd felt in a long time. Not happy, not vindicated, just resolved. Blaine never apologized in a real way. Not with any depth. But that was okay. I wasn't looking for an apology. I was looking for distance. And I'd found it. The months that followed were unremarkable in the best way. I focused on my life, my work, and my future. I started going on walks again, cooking more, seeing friends without constantly checking my phone to see if another disaster was waiting for me in my inbox. One evening, I got home from a long day, kicked off my shoes, and checked the mail. Among the usual junk was a plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a crumpled check. $600. The note attached was short. Not much, but I'll keep sending what I can. Sorry. B. I stared at it for a while. I didn't even know if it would clear. I wasn't even sure if I cared. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was a scam. Maybe it was Blaine trying, in his own half-formed way, to make things right. I deposited it. It cleared. Another check came 2 months later. Then nothing for a while. Then another small one. A slow trickle. Nothing consistent, nothing enough to make a dent, but maybe enough to show he was starting to see the weight of what he'd done. I didn't respond. I didn't send a thank you. I didn't reach out. I just kept living. The checks came sporadically, some months nothing, other times a few $100s. It wasn't the money that stood out. It was an effort. Or maybe it was guilt wrapped in obligation. I wasn't sure. And I wasn't trying to interpret it anymore. I deposited them and moved on with my day. Still, I kept every note that came with them. They were scribbled on torn notebook pages, sticky notes, even a receipt once. Always short. Always signed the same way, B. He never once asked if we could talk. Never asked if I forgave him. He didn't bring up the party, or the business, or the moment I told him no. It was like that one word had ended an entire chapter of our lives, and now he was mailing loose apologies with barely enough postage. I hadn't seen him in person since that awkward day on Mom's porch. I avoided family gatherings if I thought he might be there. Holidays became fragmented. I'd see Mom for lunch the day after Thanksgiving. I skipped Christmas dinner entirely that first year. It wasn't out of spite, I just didn't have the stomach to pretend. Mom noticed. She'd call every few weeks, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to nudge. Your brother's not doing great, she said once. He's staying clean, though. Been working every day. I didn't ask what clean meant. I didn't want to know. That was a rabbit hole I wasn't ready to fall into. I could accept that he was working. That he was maybe trying. But I wasn't going to unravel everything again just because he showed signs of improvement. Eventually, she stopped bringing him up altogether. I think she understood, finally, that the damage wasn't going to be undone with a few phone calls and some mailed-in apologies. That Blaine's problems weren't something I could, or should, fix. Maybe I've done enough. Time did what it always does, softened the edges. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. But I was cautious. Protect my space. My peace. There were still financial reminders. The loan remained a line item in my monthly spreadsheet. Each payment chipped away at the weight of it, but it would be years before it was gone completely. Every now and then, I'd catch myself doing the math, how much I had left, how long it would take, how far ahead I could get if I took on one more consulting client. And then, sometimes, I'd wonder what Blaine thought about when he made those checks out. Did he feel guilt? Regret? Did he curse my name or his own when he saw the balance drop from his account? I'd never know. And I didn't need to. Life carried on. I bought a condo near the lake, something small but beautiful. My job had become second nature, complex, high stakes, but manageable. I liked being the one people turn to when things get dicey. I liked being the reliable one. I started dating again. Slowly. I'd kept myself walled off for so long that intimacy felt foreign at first, like I was learning a new language. But it got easier. I met someone, then a few people. Some ended amicably, others with that quiet fizzle that adulthood specializes in. I wasn't chasing a perfect ending anymore. I just wanted honest moments. One night, maybe a year and a half after the fallout, I ran into someone who'd been at that party. A guy named Trent, Blaine's old college friend. We bumped into each other at a client mixer downtown. He didn't recognize me right away, but I recognized him. He squinted. Wait. Are you Blaine's brother? I nodded. His face changed, like he realized he'd stepped into something delicate. Hey. About that party. I'd been meaning to say, I had no idea he was going to say that stuff. It was messed up. I shrugged. Water under the bridge. No, seriously. A bunch of us thought it was a joke at first, but then it got weird. Like. Mean. He was drunk. Or something. I nodded. I didn't need the recap. I remembered it in perfect clarity. I heard he lost the space, Trent added. And, he's been couch surfing? I wouldn't know, I said, keeping my voice even. We don't really talk. Trent nodded slowly, sipping his drink. Well, for what it's worth. That was a bad look. You didn't deserve that. I thanked him and moved on. But later that night, alone in my apartment, I thought about how people remember moments differently. How some freeze in your memory like ice, sharp and painful, while others melt into vague regrets. For me, that party had been the line in the sand. But for others, it was just another night. Another toast. Another laugh. That's what stuck with me. How casually some people can treat things that shatter you. I still hadn't answered any of Blaine's emails or notes. He never asked for that, though. He never even asked if I'd gotten them. It was almost like he assumed the silence was earned. And maybe it was. Still, when the next check came, I opened the envelope a little slower. Read the note a little longer. This one was different. Longer. Almost unsure of itself. I know I'll never make it right, but I'm not going to stop trying. I think about that night every day. About how I thought it was funny. It wasn't. You were right to walk away. I would have too. Then, in smaller letters, as if he was afraid of his own words, if you ever want to talk, I'm here. If not, I get it. No apology. Just an acknowledgement. And somehow, that said more than anything else he'd ever mailed. I folded the note, slid it into the old shoebox where I kept the others, and placed the check on my desk. I didn't cash it right away this time. I left the check sitting there for days. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was the principle, the unspoken question beneath it. Did I want to reopen this door? Was Blaine actually changing, or just better at pretending? But the truth is, I didn't need to answer those questions. I'd already closed the chapter. And just because someone sends mail doesn't mean you have to reply. Still, I was human. Curious. So I did something I hadn't done since that night at the wine bar. I Googled him. A few social media hits popped up. A LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated in 2 years. An old Twitter account where he used to tweet entrepreneur grind nonsense. But then I found something new, an Instagram page under a different handle. Low followers. Mostly blurry photos of food deliveries and one-bedroom apartments. But there it was, Blaine Brooks, freelance marketing, copywriting, graphic design. DM for rates. It almost made me laugh. Blaine, who once said 9 to 5s were for crap, now hustling for freelance gigs online. And then, the final piece dropped into place. A former colleague of mine, Naomi, sent out a mass email at work announcing she was hiring a freelance content team for a major rebrand she was spearheading. Big budget. High exposure. And guess whose portfolio she was circulating as one of the possible freelancers? Blaine's. I couldn't help myself. I picked up the phone, called Naomi, and we caught up like old times. Eventually, I slid the conversation where I needed it to go. So, that list of freelancers you're building. Do you get them personally? We do some background checks, she said. You know any of the names? One stood out to me, I said casually. Blaine Brooks. That's my brother. She paused. Oh. Wow. Small world. He's talented, I said, not lying. But be careful. I wouldn't let him near anything that requires follow-through. Especially financial. He has a history. I didn't go into detail. I didn't need to. Just enough for her to pause, enough to plant doubt. It was clean. No rage. No smear campaign. Just facts from someone who knew him best. 2 days later, Naomi replied to the group. Thanks everyone. We've made our final selections for the freelance team. Appreciate all the submissions. Blaine didn't make the cut. I didn't celebrate, not in the traditional sense. No one cheered. No balloons dropped. But there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that, for once, he didn't benefit from skating by charm and hope. He didn't know I had anything to do with it. He never would. That was the point. Sometimes, revenge doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes, it's just a quiet redirection. A hand on a chess piece. A check that never gets cashed. I finally framed the last note he sent. Just the last one. Not the others. I didn't want a shrine to regret, just a reminder of what I survived. Of who I used to be, and who I had to become to get out of that mess. And then, I did one final thing. I paid off the last of the loan early. A lump sum. Clean break. I closed the account and called the bank, confirmed the balance was zero, and asked for a confirmation letter. When it came, I scanned it, emailed a copy to myself, and filed the paper version away in a drawer I almost never open. I left the check sitting there for days. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was the principle, the unspoken question beneath it. Did I want to reopen this door? Was Blaine actually changing, or just better at pretending? But the truth is, I didn't need to answer those questions. I'd already closed the chapter. And just because someone sends mail doesn't mean you have to reply. Still, I was human. Curious. So I did something I hadn't done since that night at the wine bar. I Googled him. A few social media hits popped up. A LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated in 2 years. An old Twitter account where he used to tweet entrepreneur grind nonsense. But then I found something new, an Instagram page under a different handle. Low followers. Mostly blurry photos of food deliveries and one-bedroom apartments. But there it was, Blaine Brooks, freelance marketing, copywriting, graphic design. DM for rates. It almost made me laugh. Blaine, who once said 9 to 5s were for crap, now hustling for freelance gigs online. And then, the final piece dropped into place. A former colleague of mine, Naomi, sent out a mass email at work announcing she was hiring a freelance content team for a major rebrand she was spearheading. Big budget. High exposure. And guess whose portfolio she was circulating as one of the possible freelancers? Blaine's. I couldn't help myself. I picked up the phone, called Naomi, and we caught up like old times. Eventually, I slid the conversation where I needed it to go. So, that list of freelancers you're building. Do you get them personally? We do some background checks, she said. You know any of the names? One stood out to me, I said casually. Blaine Brooks. That's my brother. She paused. Oh. Wow. Small world. He's talented, I said, not lying. But be careful. I wouldn't let him near anything that requires follow-through. Especially financial. He has a history. I didn't go into detail. I didn't need to. Just enough for her to pause, enough to plant doubt. It was clean. No rage. No smear campaign. Just facts from someone who knew him best. 2 days later, Naomi replied to the group. Thanks everyone. We've made our final selections for the freelance team. Appreciate all the submissions. Blaine didn't make the cut. I didn't celebrate, not in the traditional sense. No one cheered. No balloons dropped. But there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that, for once, he didn't benefit from skating by charm and hope. He didn't know I had anything to do with it. He never would. That was the point. Sometimes, revenge doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes, it's just a quiet redirection. A hand on a chess piece. A check that never gets cashed. I finally framed the last note he sent. Just the last one. Not the others. I didn't want a shrine to regret, just a reminder of what I survived. Of who I used to be, and who I had to become to get out of that mess. And then, I did one final thing. I paid off the last of the loan early. A lump sum. Clean break. I closed the account and called the bank, confirmed the balance was zero, and asked for a confirmation letter. When it came, I scanned it, emailed a copy to myself, and filed the paper version away in a drawer I almost never open.